Two hikers were exploring a dense forest when something caught their attention. Standing motionless among the trees was a wild Mustang alone, but when they looked at its face, a chill ran down their spines. Something was wrong, something disturbing. This was no ordinary horse. Its eyes carried a deep mystery, and the scars on its face told a story one could only imagine. What had it been through? How did it end up here? And most shocking of all, why? Why did it seem to be waiting for someone? What happened next will leave you speechless. The crisp morning air carried the scent of damp earth and pine needles. As Ethan and Mark made their way through the dense forest, it was supposed to be a simple weekend hike, a chance to escape the noise of the city and reconnect with nature. But as they walked deeper into the woods, something felt off. Then they saw it, standing in a small clearing between towering trees. Motionless like a statue was a wild Mustang. Its dark, muscular body was covered in dirt, its mane tangled from the wind. But that wasn't what sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. It was the horse's face. Long, jagged scars ran across its muzzle, cutting through the coarse hair like a painful reminder of something terrible. One of its eyes had a slight milky haze over it, as if it had once been injured. Yet despite its rough appearance, there was something hauntingly intelligent in its gaze. As if it weren't just watching them but studying them, Mark took a slow step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, does that look normal to you?" Ethan shook his head, feeling a lump in his throat. "No, it doesn't." The Mustang didn't flinch. It didn't run. It just stood there, as if it had been waiting for them. Then, out of nowhere, the horse let out a deep, guttural sound, something between a whinny and a groan. It was a sound of pain. Mark's instincts kicked in. That horse is hurt. But before they could take another step, the Mustang suddenly turned its head towards something in the distance, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. It was alert. Ethan followed its gaze, and that's when his heart nearly stopped. Through the trees, barely visible in the thick morning fog, something was moving, and judging by the horse's reaction, it wasn't friendly. Ethan's pulse quickened as his eyes darted through the trees. The fog was thick, curling between the trunks like ghostly fingers, making it nearly impossible to see what was moving beyond the clearing. The Mustang remained frozen, ears twitching, nostrils flared, muscles tensed. Mark took a cautious step forward, his hiking boots crunching against the damp leaves. "Do you see that?" he murmured. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, and I don't like it." The Mustang let out a deep exhale, shifting its weight slightly. It wasn't afraid. It was watching, as if it knew exactly what was coming. Then the sound came again, a sharp rustling of branches, a low, dragging noise, heavy footsteps, but uneven. Whoever was there wasn't walking normally. Mark clenched his fists. Is it an animal? Ethan wasn't sure. He knew the sounds of the forest well. He and Mark had spent years hiking together, encountering all kinds of wildlife. This was different. Suddenly, the Mustang took a step toward them. Ethan tensed, half expecting the horse to charge, but instead, it lowered its head slightly, staring directly at him. There was something unsettlingly human about the way it looked at him, like it was trying to tell him something. Then, in one swift motion, the horse turned away and started walking. "Wait, where is it going?" Mark whispered. Ethan didn't answer. His gut told him one thing: follow it. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, matching the Mustang's slow, deliberate pace. "Ethan, are you serious?" Mark hissed, grabbing his arm. "What if this thing leads us straight into a mountain lion's den?" Ethan exhaled sharply, eyes locked on the horse's muscular frame as it disappeared between the trees. "I don't think it would be walking so calmly if there was a predator nearby." Mark groaned but didn't argue. This is how horror movies start, man. Still, he followed. The forest grew eerily silent as they trailed behind the Mustang. The only sounds were the steady clop of its hooves against the damp earth, and the occasional rustle of branches above. Ethan's mind raced. Why wasn't the horse running? Most Mustangs were skittish around humans, let alone to strangers in the middle of the woods. And those scars. He swallowed. What had happened to this animal? After several minutes, the Mustang came to a stop. Ethan and Mark did too. Ahead of them, the forest floor dipped into a small, overgrown ravine. Fallen logs crisscrossed the ground, tangled in vines, and in the middle of it all, A shattered wooden fence. Mark furrowed his brows. What the hell? Ethan stepped closer, kneeling to inspect the jagged edges of the wood. It had been broken apart forcefully, not by time, but by something desperate to escape. Then he saw it. A rusted chain still hung loosely from one of the fence posts. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Someone had kept an animal here. Mark pointed at the ground. Hoofprints, a lot of them. Ethan ran a hand over his face. This horse was trapped. Mark exhaled sharply. You think someone did this to him? Before Ethan could answer, a sound ripped through the silence, a deep, guttural growl. Both men snapped their heads up. The Mustang stiffened, ears pinned back. Something was watching them. Mark grabbed Ethan's sleeve. We need to go, now. But Ethan barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the shadows beyond the ravine. Because for the first time since they found the Mustang, it looked afraid. The forest felt different now. The moment that low growl sliced through the silence, everything changed. The mist that had once given the woods an almost mystical calm now felt suffocating. Pressing against Ethan and Mark like an unseen force, the Mustang, which had remained eerily composed up until now, suddenly shifted its stance. Its ears flicked back, tail swishing as it let out a deep, nervous snort. Ethan could feel it. Something was nearby, watching, waiting. Mark took a step back. Ethan, I swear if this is a bear. Ethan held up a hand, silencing him. The growl had stopped, but the forest hadn't returned to normal. No birds, no rustling, nothing. The Mustang whipped its head around, nostrils flaring, then charged forward. Straight past them, right toward the sound. No, wait, Ethan called. But the horse was already moving, hooves pounding against the earth. Without thinking, Ethan took off after it. Are you insane? Mark hissed, chasing after him. That thing could be leading us to our deaths. But Ethan wasn't listening. Something inside him, a deep, gut-level instinct, told him this horse knew something they didn't. They ran through the thickening fog, dodging low branches, their boots slipping on damp leaves. The Mustang was fast, but it wasn't running away. It was leading them. Then, just as suddenly as it had bolted, it stopped. Ethan and Mark skidded to a halt behind it, panting. They were in a new part of the forest, a small clearing, surrounded by fallen logs and overgrown shrubs. The Mustang stood at the edge of the space, ears forward, head low. It was staring at something. Ethan followed its gaze, and his stomach dropped. Lying just beyond the tall grass, half hidden by the fog, was a pile of discarded rope and broken metal chains, rusted, tangled like they'd been ripped apart by force. Mark stepped forward, his breath coming fast. Jesus, what the hell happened here? Ethan crouched down, heart pounding. The chains weren't old. The rope was still relatively intact. Whatever had been tied up here hadn't been gone for long. Then he noticed something else, something half buried in the dirt. Slowly, he reached forward, brushing away the damp soil with his fingers, and then he saw it. A brand. A metal branding iron, its surface charred black, the shape barely recognizable. Ethan swallowed hard, turning it over in his hands. The letter H was burned into the iron. Mark swore under his breath. Who the hell brands a Mustang? They're wild. Ethan shook his head. Not if someone tried to break it. His mind raced. This wasn't just a case of a horse escaping captivity. This Mustang had been trapped here, restrained, and forced into submission. But something had gone wrong. It had gotten free, and it had survived. He turned to the Mustang, which was still standing eerily still, its deep brown eyes locked onto him. It had led them here for a reason. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Dude, I think we just walked into something bad. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the sound of footsteps echoed from the trees. Not an animal, human. Mark cursed. Tell me that's another hiker. Ethan didn't answer. His entire body had gone rigid, every nerve on high alert. He could barely see through the fog, but the sound was unmistakable. Someone was approaching them, and they weren't in a hurry. The Mustang suddenly snorted loudly, stamping its hoof against the dirt, a warning. Mark grabbed Ethan's arm. We need to go, now. But Ethan didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the shadows between the trees. Because whoever was out there, they weren't lost. They had been watching them the whole time. Ethan's breath was shallow as he locked eyes with Mark. The footsteps were getting closer. Whoever was out there wasn't running, they were walking. Deliberate, unhurried. The Mustang stood completely still, its ears twitching at the sound. It wasn't afraid. It was waiting. Mark clenched his fists. "Ethan, we need to go." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to run, but something about this situation felt wrong. They had uncovered too much, and now someone knew they were here. The first shadow appeared through the fog, a tall figure, barely visible, between the trees, moving slowly. The closer they got, the more details emerged: a heavy jacket, broad shoulders, and a limp in their step. Then the metallic glint of a rifle slung over their back. Ethan's stomach turned. Mark grabbed his arm, whispering fiercely, "Ethan, move." Ethan backed up a step, but as he did, the Mustang suddenly let out a loud, forceful snort, its hoof stomping into the dirt. The man stopped. Silence. The air was thick with tension, the kind that sent a primal warning through Ethan's body. Then the man finally spoke. "That's my horse." His voice was rough, like gravel grinding underfoot. Mark inhaled sharply. "Oh, hell no." Ethan's fingers curled into fists. "You branded this horse?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if sizing them up, then took another step forward. The Mustang tensed. "That Mustang belongs to me," the man repeated. "Step away from it." Ethan could feel his heartbeat hammering in his ears. The horse had led them here for what? To find the chains, the branding iron, to reveal the truth. This man wasn't here by accident. Mark wasn't having it. "A wild Mustang doesn't belong to anyone," he snapped. "That brand says otherwise." The man didn't react. Instead, he took another slow step forward. The Mustang suddenly moved, stepping between Ethan and Mark and blocking them. Ethan's breath caught. The horse was protecting them. The man's lip curled in irritation. "That animal is dangerous," he muttered. "I did what I had to do." Ethan's blood ran cold. "I did what I had to do." Mark let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah? That's why you chained it up in the middle of the damn woods." The man's eyes darkened. But before he could speak, the Mustang let out a sharp, piercing cry. Then it charged, not at Ethan, not at Mark, but at the man. The sound of hooves thundered through the forest as the Mustang lunged forward. The man barely had time to react. He stumbled back, tripping over the uneven ground. Mark grabbed Ethan. "Run!" They bolted. The forest was a blur as they sprinted through the trees. Ethan could hear the Mustang behind them, its powerful strides pounding the earth. A gunshot rang out. Ethan's chest tightened. "Oh God!" He glanced back. The man was on one knee, rifle aimed. But before he could fire again, the Mustang reared up, hooves kicking wildly. Mark grabbed Ethan's jacket, yanking him forward. "Move, damn it!" They ran harder, their lungs burning as they weaved between trees. Ethan's thoughts were racing. Who the hell was that guy? What had he done to the Mustang? And how long had he been watching them? Finally, they broke through the tree line, the dirt path. Their car, safety. They nearly collapsed against the vehicle, gasping for breath. Ethan turned, expecting the Mustang to have vanished back into the trees. But it hadn't. It was standing there, watching them, for the first time since they had found it. The Mustang looked at ease. Mark, still breathless, ran a hand down his face. "Dude, I think we just made an enemy." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at the horse, then back at the forest. The Mustang had trusted them, and now it was their turn to protect it. The Mustang stood motionless at the tree line, its deep brown eyes fixed on Ethan and Mark. There was no fear in its gaze, only a quiet intensity, as if it were waiting for their next move. Mark wiped a hand down his face, still breathless. "What the hell did we just get ourselves into?" Ethan didn't answer right away. His chest was still tight from running, his mind racing with the weight of what had just happened. A man had tried to shoot them, over a horse. No, not just any horse, this Mustang. His grip tightened into fists, the scars, the chains, the brand. That man had done something to this horse, and the Mustang had led them straight to the truth. Ethan turned back to the Mustang, stepping forward slowly. "You're not just some lost horse, are you?" The Mustang exhaled through its nostrils, flicking its ears at his voice. It didn't move away. It trusted him. Mark threw his hands up. "Dude, Are we really doing this? That guy had a gun. Ethan turned to him, his jaw clenched, and he was willing to use it. Which means he has something to hide. Mark swore under his breath. That's exactly why we should leave this alone. Ethan shook his head. I can't. Mark gave him a look of disbelief. You can't, Ethan. We almost died back there. Ethan's eyes flickered back to the Mustang. And so did he. Double quotes, silence. Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You really want to go up against some psycho redneck with a gun? Ethan crossed his arms. We don't have to. We just have to make sure this horse never goes back to him. Mark narrowed his eyes. And how exactly do you plan to do that? We can't just take a Mustang home like it's a stray dog. Ethan took a slow breath. There had to be a way. Then it hit him, the brand. His eyes widened as the realization took hold. This wasn't legal. Mustangs were federally protected under U.S. law. Branding and capturing them without government authorization was illegal. Ethan turned to Mark. We need proof. Mark blinked. Proof? Ethan nodded. We can't just go to the cops and say some guy is keeping a Mustang hostage in the woods. We need something concrete. Mark groaned. You mean, go back there, to the guy who literally tried to kill us? Ethan's gut twisted. That was the last thing he wanted to do. But if they didn't, that man would come back for the horse, and next time, he wouldn't just be warning them. Ethan turned to the Mustang. It was still standing calmly, watching them, waiting. A decision settled in his chest. He had to finish what the horse had started. He looked at Mark. We don't have to face him. We just need photos of the branding iron, the chains, anything that proves what he did. Mark let out a humorless laugh. Right? Because sneaking back into some backwoods psycho's territory sounds like a great plan. Ethan exhaled sharply. I'm not asking you to come with me, but I'm going back. Mark muttered a curse under his breath, running a hand through his hair. You're going to get yourself killed. Ethan didn't reply. He turned back to the Mustang and reached out a hand. The horse didn't flinch. Instead, it stepped forward. Ethan's breath caught. It trusted him. Mark sighed. In defeat. Damn it, Ethan. He shook his head. Fine, but if we die, I'm haunting you in the afterlife. Ethan smirked, but his chest was still tight. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't just about saving a horse anymore. This was about uncovering the truth. And something told him the truth was going to be far darker than they'd ever imagined. The forest loomed ahead, darker than before. Everything about this felt wrong. Ethan gripped his phone tightly, his pulse drumming in his ears as he and Mark moved carefully through the thick underbrush. They were trespassing on dangerous ground now. The Mustang had stayed behind, watching, then disappear into the trees. It trusted them to finish this. Mark kept his voice low. I can't believe we're actually doing this. Ethan didn't answer. His focus was locked ahead, his mind replaying the events from earlier, the scars on the Mustang, the chains in the dirt, the brand, the gunshot. This wasn't just about a horse anymore. This was about stopping something much worse. They reached the clearing in a matter of minutes, moving carefully to avoid dry leaves and twigs. The fog had thinned, revealing the abandoned corral, where the Mustang had once been held. The remnants of the fence stood in eerie silence. The branding iron still lay half buried in the dirt. This was it, the proof they needed. Mark pulled out his phone and started snapping pictures. All right, let's get this and get out. Ethan knelt near the rusted chain, his fingers grazing the broken links. The Mustang must have fought like hell to escape. A chill ran down his spine. How many others hadn't? Then a voice cut through the trees. Thought I told you to leave. Ethan's heart seized. He looked up. The man stood at the tree line, rifle in hand. But this time, he wasn't alone. 3 other men stood beside him, their expressions cold, unreadable. This wasn't just one crazy guy with a grudge. This was bigger. Mark slowly raised his hands. Look, man, we're just hikers. We didn't mean. Shut up. The man snapped. His voice was ice. Drop the phones. Ethan's fingers tightened around his. Not a chance. His mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned. No one knew they were out here. If these men wanted to make them disappear, they could. The leader took a slow step forward. You don't belong here. Ethan met his glare. Neither does that horse. A flicker of something passed through the man's eyes. Then, without warning, a deafening sound ripped through the clearing, a scream of fury, a force of nature. The Mustang charged. The world exploded into chaos. The horse barreled through the trees, dirt flying beneath its hooves as it charged straight for the men. Ethan didn't think. He grabbed Mark's arm. Run! The gun fired. The Mustang dodged, rearing up just as the bullet grazed past. It kicked forward, sending one of the men sprawling into the dirt. Mark yanked Ethan toward the trees. Go, go, go. Branches snapped as they ran, adrenaline slamming through their veins. Ethan heard the men shouting, but their voices were drowned out by the sound of pounding hooves. The Mustang wasn't just attacking, it was leading them out. They didn't stop running until the trees opened up to the main trail. Ethan and Mark collapsed onto the dirt path, gasping for breath. Behind them, the Mustang stood tall, breathing heavily but completely unharmed. Mark looked at Ethan, still stunned. Did that horse just save us? Ethan swallowed, nodding. But his thoughts were still back in that clearing, the men, the chains, the gunfire. This wasn't over. But now they had proof, and it was time to bring them down. The Mustang stood tall, its powerful chest rising and falling as it stared back at Ethan and Mark. Even after everything, the chase, the gunfire, the danger, it wasn't running away. It had led them this far. Now it was time for them to finish the fight. Mark ran a shaky hand down his face. Okay, man, what now? Because I don't know about you, but I don't feel like getting shot today. Ethan was still catching his breath, but his mind was clear. They had proof. The branding iron, the chains, the photos on their phones. It was enough to expose everything. He turned to Mark. We go to the authorities. Mark groaned. Great, so we tell them what? That we trespassed on some illegal rancher's territory and got chased out by a bunch of armed lunatics. Ethan met his gaze. We tell them the truth. Mark hesitated. Then he let out a slow breath and nodded. All right, let's end this. By the time they reached the nearest ranger station, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving exhaustion in its place. Ethan didn't waste time. He laid everything out. The branding iron, the chains, the gunshot. The men. The ranger on duty, Officer Reynolds, listened intently, his expression growing darker with every word. When Ethan pulled out his phone and showed the photos, the ranger swore under his breath. You boys just stumbled onto something big. Mark crossed his arms. Yeah, tell that to the guy who tried to put a bullet in us. Reynolds exhaled sharply. If these men are capturing and branding wild Mustangs, that's a federal offense. And if they were willing to use force to cover it up, we're talking about serious charges. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. So you'll stop them? Reynolds nodded. We'll get a team out there first thing in the morning. But I have to ask, where's the Mustang now? Ethan glanced at Mark. Mark smirked. Waiting for us outside. Reynolds arched a brow. You're telling me that Mustang followed you all the way here? Ethan smiled. He's not done fighting yet. By dawn, a convoy of wildlife rangers, sheriff's deputies, and federal officers was headed straight for the clearing. Ethan and Mark followed behind, their hearts pounding. Would the men still be there, or had they vanished into the woods, covering their tracks? The moment they reached the site, the answer became clear. The men hadn't run. They were waiting. As soon as the first officer stepped out, the leader, the same man who had confronted them, stood in the middle of the clearing. Arms crossed, his men flanked him, their expressions tight. But this time, they weren't the ones in control. Reynolds stepped forward, voice firm. This land is now under investigation. Step aside. The leader narrowed his eyes. You have no proof. Ethan stepped beside Reynolds, holding up his phone. Yeah, then explain these. The man's jaw clenched, and just like that, it was over. The officers moved in, securing the area. They found more than just the branding iron. Hidden in the woods was an entire illegal operation, a holding pen, broken fencing, and ropes stained with blood. It wasn't just one Mustang. There had been others, and some of them hadn't made it. Ethan's stomach turned as he realized just how close this Mustang had come to sharing their fate. One of the officers approached him. Your testimony is going to be important. You helped save this horse. Ethan looked past him, toward the edge of the clearing, where the Mustang stood, watching. No chains, no fences. Free. 2 weeks later, Ethan stood by the ranch gate, the morning sun casting long shadows across the dirt road. Beside him, Mark leaned against the fence. "So what now? Are you keeping him?" Ethan chuckled. "He's a wild Mustang, Mark. He's not a pet." Mark shrugged. "Tell that to him." Ethan turned just as the Mustang trotted toward him, its dark mane flowing in the breeze. It had been staying at a local rescue ranch, recovering from its ordeal, but it never strayed far. Ethan reached out, fingers brushing against its muzzle. The Mustang didn't pull away. There was no fear in its eyes anymore, no chains, no pain. Only trust. Ethan smiled. "He'll go where he belongs, where he's safe." Mark smirked. "And let me guess you're going to make sure of that." Ethan exhaled, looking out at the open plains. "Yeah, I am." The Mustang let out a soft whinny as if it understood. As if it had always known. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a promise. The story closes with a powerful message: resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and horses. If the story inspired you, remember, every life deserves freedom, and every voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story to help spread awareness about protecting wild Mustangs.